Well, I think my observation is that the conversation that we are having today about gas is a better conversation than we have had for a long time. For quite some while, this conversation has had a tendency to be very binary. Is this the silver bullet? Is that the silver bullet? Is it going to be all renewables? Is it going to be gas? Gas is a tricky one because it sits in the middle. It is a hydrocarbon, but it's comparatively very clean hydrocarbon. I think what we're seeing today, driven by a number of developments, is that we're starting to get the necessary nuance in this conversation. And I think with that comes also the realization that actually I don't see much of a difference between the policymakers in the industry with respect to the end game. Of course, we need to get to a more sustainable, low-carbon future. Of course, we need to accelerate the energy transition. We know this. This is an existential threat that we're facing. Where the conversation needs to go now is how do we pragmatically get to that point in the fastest way possible? And I think that there is an increasing realization that gas is essential to get us to that result. Then there is plenty of studies. I saw McKinsey came out with a study only recently where they said actually the global peak of the gas market is going to be about 2037. Then you will see a slow decline of 0.4% until 2050. But basically what this tells us is that we are increasing gas, and then we will have the same level until 2050. In the countries in the Balkan region, there is a lot of countries who are looking at expanding gas in the energy mix, including Greece, because they want to wean themselves off dependency, and they want to get away from traditional coal. So I think gas is absolutely here to stay. What is incumbent on us in the industry is to figure out a way, how do we actually monetize that in a way that safeguards the equitable transition, because we need to think about cost, it is reality. We need to think about energy security, but of course doing that in a way that is also accelerating the end result of that green transition.
There's a question here.
Hi, I'm Dan Alpert from Westwood Capital. If Rikard is correct, and we're now moving beyond a binary discussion, and maybe in polite company we can even talk about things like the East Med pipeline. Is it possible, and if we're really going to start to talk about 30 or 40-year time frames, is it possible to move forward a discussion of a pipeline of some sort, whether it's the original East Med construct or something else, to bring in Eastern Mediterranean gas on a parallel track with the electric interconnectors, so that we, because this is a political issue at the end of the day, and is it possible to sort of apply a political salve to this by advancing both on a parallel track?
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to bring both of you back in. You don't have to respond immediately to that question, but if you want to. Yeah? Rikard?
Well, so let me do this. That's a really good question. So let me take that opportunity and sort of weave this into a little bit of my points to try to bring it all together. Because I think that is exactly the kind of questions that need to be asked. How does this bring together? So I would say this. So if we, for the sake of argument, agree that this cannot be a binary conversation, there is also definitely a role for gas to play. Now, of course, wearing my Greek hat, I would say, well, then Greece is one of the countries in the region that has not really sort of made the efforts to monetize its gas assets yet. And we are talking about potentially significant assets. It's hard to put a number on it, but if we're looking at market values, we're talking about hundreds of billions of gas. Now, today, given everything that is going on, both in terms of the geopolitical situation, but as well how we're progressing the transition agenda and the green agenda, it's pretty obvious that we need to reevaluate in Europe how do we actually address these gas resources. And that is, of course, what the Greek Prime Minister did. The Greek Prime Minister in mid-April actually announced that Greece is now firmly committed to accelerate the exploration and the monetization of the country's gas resources. And he also declared this to be a national strategic priority. Now, that announcement was, of course, preceded by quite a lot of in-depth analysis between HHRM, the organization that I represent, and here today with my CEO as well as the Prime Minister's office and the ministry. And it's actually gone quite far already. So already in January and February, and I emphasize those days because they were, of course, preceding the Russian attack on Ukraine. We actually concluded 2 seismic studies already in the Ionian Sea. Now we need to see where that results, but that brings me to your question, sir. What about the infrastructure? There's been a lot of discussion about the infrastructure. Well, those of you who have known me for a while know that infrastructure is very close to my heart. I used to lead the development of the Trans-Adriatic Pipeline infrastructure as well. And as I came into that, there was an awful lot of speculation about this is not going to happen, this is going to happen, this cannot happen. That is my answer to the question of this specific pipeline as well. Pipeline infrastructure brings supply and demand together. We understand now that the demand side of the equation is changing, and we are accepting that the demand side of the equation is changing. We're working very actively with both national and international partners to address the supply side by exploiting the country's own natural resources. Then the debate is, how do we bring that to market? And I think the discussion about that particular pipeline and other particular pipelines, frankly, that doesn't excite me that much, because when we get to the point, we will find a solution to bring this gas to the market. And that could be the old constellation, the new constellation, but I think it's important to not lose track of that aspect. So I think the answer is, when we get to the point that we need to develop that infrastructure, we will develop that infrastructure. And yes, of course, that infrastructure will run in parallel to a lot of other infrastructure, be that electricity infrastructure and renewable infrastructure, because as I wanted to start off with, I think we're getting to the realization that we don't need this or that, but in order for this to be a successful transition, we need all of it.